All right, let's do it. So today I get to do that thing that I hate to do, but I have to do because I've set the precedent, and if I stop doing it, it starts looking like I'm cherry picking, and it's just, okay. So, I have talked in the past about some actors in major geek-related franchises who have had some scandals, not because I like talking about scandal, I don't, but because those scandals either have or have the potential to directly impact the properties that I do care about. I've done it before with Gina Carano, I've talked about Amber Heard, I've talked about Ezra Miller multiple times, and now we gotta talk about Jonathan Majors, who is part of the MCU, currently playing the recurring villain, Kang. I say recurring, he's appeared twice so far, but they're planning to do a lot with him. Okay. I'm going to do this the way that I normally do this. I will give you as much information as currently exists that I could find at time of recording. I am going to try and get this out the day after I record it, which means there should not be too much time for more stuff to happen between when I shoot this and when it goes out. Who knows? But I am not trying to parse exactly what the legal outcome of any of this will be, nor am I actually trying to pass direct judgment on Jonathan Majors, because ultimately, I don't know what actually happened. I know what he's accused of, and I know what's out there, and I will talk about that. But the main reason that I ever talk about this stuff is how it impacts the future plans of the properties that these people are part of. Because, honestly, that's the only way I can digest this stuff, is to filter it through the lens of publicity and planning and, creative works. Because if I just take it in as gossip, I'm going to lose my mind real quick. Anyways, Jonathan Majors, on Saturday, the 25th of March, was arrested following a domestic dispute resulting in a, at present, unnamed woman in her 30s to be taken to a hospital for minor injuries to her head and neck. Majors was arrested and charged with assault, attempted assault, harassment, and aggravated harassment. Those might sound somewhat redundant. It's just kind of the way the legal system, especially the criminal system here, works, is that you end up with multiple charges for effectively the same thing just because of the specific wordings of each charge and just how the legal system works. But that's what he was charged with on Saturday. On Sunday the 26th, his lawyer, one Priya Chaudhry, had proclaimed that he was innocent. You would expect her to, because, well, he's her client. She's supposed to say that. But she also made the claim that the victim recanted the accusations, which I've seen reported a few places, but everywhere that's reporting it only cites Majors' lawyer as the source on that. And I could not find anything to corroborate it. And somewhat despite that claim, Majors was arraigned later that same day. So if that is true, then the full effects of her having recanted that have not trickled in and stopped the process yet. Or it's also possible that that wasn't actually what happened, but that's what she said. Nobody else has corroborated that, and it does not show up in official records that anything has been recanted as yet. Now, the various charges which I've already named are being done as misdemeanors, and Majors currently has a May 8th court date. Now, at time of recording, that's pretty much all we've got. Actual evidence has not really been put forward. Majors' lawyer said something about a video that exonerated him, but nothing like that has surfaced, if it exists. So right now, we've just got someone who claims to have been assaulted. He has been charged. He says he didn't do it. And that's kind of all we've got. Or at least it was initially. Now, of course, initially as a sort of one person's word against another, people will make their own calls on who they believe, barring corroborative evidence. And people will have their own reasons for having a tendency to believe one or the other in a situation like this, for any variety of reasons that I don't want to get into. But what I will say is there has been corroboration of these specific acts, not that, but corroborations that this is not atypical behavior for Majors. Now, again, this is just coming from a few sources, and I will explain who they are and what they said. The first is film director A.B. Allen, who back in February tweeted There's a particular actor relatively new on the scene who Twitter has violently fallen head over heels for, who in actuality is a vicious, cruel, abusive human being, both professionally and in his personal life. And every new viral thirst tweet about him drives me insane. Now, after news of Majors broke, a Twitter user tweeted out a screen grab of that original tweet from Alan, along with the headline about Majors, and said, well, I guess now we know who that tweet was about. And Alan replied to that, just saying, ding, 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 ding. In a similar vein, there is Broadway actor and director Tim Nicolai. Nicolai put out a similar tweet stating, it's a strange relief to know other humans were out there who understand, and who went on to say that many in the Yale Drama School community, of which Majors was a part, consider him to be a sociopath and abuser. And it's worth noting that is the way in which these two people know him and or people around him. So far as I could tell, they have not ever worked professionally with him, but he attended Yale Drama School and works within or has worked and been known within same circles that these two people have been in. So while these tweets do not directly corroborate the specific charges or the specific incident, they do start to paint a picture that is going to make it harder to claim that this is a one-off. Instead, it at least has the potential to look like a situation of people knew and weren't coming forward. Now, both of these people were actually sort of pressed on the idea, why didn't you say something? And they both gave very similar answers, which basically amounted to, because we hadn't directly experienced these, but we knew people who did, we did not feel comfortable potentially outing victims who did not wish to be known. And additionally, what would our statements of, oh, we know someone who this happened to actually carry? But here we get to just add our voices to something that is already on the record. So that's sort of their perspective on this. It is interesting noting that both of these people have since privated their Twitter accounts. Update time. That statement was true at the time I said it. However, one of them, A.B. Allen, has unprivated their Twitter account. And that actually also gave me access to another detail that I think needs to be added in. They actually followed up on their initial ding, 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 ding reaction to the news having been broken and their earlier tweet being tied to Majors. They expressed regret at being as flippant with their response and also went on to clarify that they had assumed that there'd been like some sort of shoving match at a bar or something at the time they tweeted that and hadn't looked into it in more detail. Because when they did, they felt the need to clarify that their understanding of what Majors was capable of or had done was much more in the realm of psychological abuse, verbal abuse, not necessarily physical. So while that is not exactly exonerating or completely reversing of their statements earlier regarding Majors, it does paint a slightly different picture in terms of what they understand him to be and what they are claiming he is. But let's jump on back to the subject of the accounts having been privated, even if it was only briefly in the case of Allen. Now, I was not able to find any statements from either of them indicating why they did that. So whether it was they were being hounded with questions they didn't feel like answering about Majors, or whether it was they were being hounded with harassment by people who would prefer to believe Jonathan Majors, I don't know. But given that it happened so quickly after all this broke, I have a very hard time believing that both of them privating their Twitter accounts is not related to them having spoken out about Majors. And an additional follow-up on this. As I said, A.B. Allen has reactivated their Twitter account, but this does kind of show that, at least in their case, there may have been an element of abuse from supporters of Majors or just people who rail against anything they perceive as being cancel culture coming after them. And while they don't confirm that this behavior contributed to their temporarily privating of the Twitter account, I certainly would not be surprised, because this sort of stuff, yeah, it happens a lot. So that brings us to Disney and Marvel, and what the heck do they do now? Because to say that Majors is a huge part of what they're planning to do going forward is an understatement. To date, Majors has already appeared in the first season of Loki, as well as Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. In addition to that, He is planned to make multiple appearances, next going to be seen in the second season of Loki, but he is intended to appear all over the place. If you haven't really been following Marvel or you dropped off it, here's the really short version. Kang is a time traveler, and his existence is very much tied at this point to Marvel's introduction of the multiverse, meaning there is a multitude of different variants of Kang. We have encountered 2. There are many more out there which could see many, many, many potential uses. And we already know the eventual team up that phase, I believe 5 that we're in right now is going to eventually be building towards, or it may even be in phase 6 at this. I don't know. I'm losing track of all that off the top of my head. But eventually it's all going to build to Kang Dynasty. He is the Thanos of what's going on right now, and much more so than Josh Brolin was as Thanos. He is very much there with his own face. He had some instances of being heavily CGI'd over, but it's him. He's visible. You can't replace him easily, as theoretically in a pinch could have been done with Josh Brolin. Because, well, actually, he wasn't even the original Thanos. The Thanos we saw in the Avengers post-credits sequence was just somebody they put the effects over in a silhouette. They hadn't even cast the part yet. So Disney has huge plans for this guy. So what do? Now, the best outcome for Disney will be if Majors' lawyer turns out to have been accurate, that the victim recanted, and that the charges are then dropped. That is 100% the best case scenario for Disney, because then they can just go, okay, there was clearly, something happened, but there was a misunderstanding. Looks like everything's resolved. We can move on. But if that doesn't happen, if the alleged victim holds on to her story, and if this actually enters a courtroom, then they're going to have to make some tough decisions. And the obvious immediate thing to compare this to would be Ezra Miller. Although it's important to note, not Ezra Miller at this stage in Ezra Miller's whole thing, because at this point, Ezra Miller has got a protracted history of nonsense. I'm not even going to begin to get into it. I've had to do multiple videos on it at this point. But the sort of first initial red flag with Miller had to do with an incident in a bar. And while Miller was not charged at that time, this bears a little bit of a resemblance of, oh boy, oh crap, did we just put a lot of time and effort and trust into an actor that is going to get us in trouble? And Disney on that front is kind of in a tougher position than Warner Brothers Discovery is, because Warner Brothers doesn't have a family-friendly reputation to live up to, but Disney does. And that reputation has actually caused them to make mistakes before. It's why they had the entire debacle firing James Gunn over dredged up nonsense, simply because it went against their family value image. So obviously, again, that all panned out eventually after a lot of mess. But Disney's very protective of its brand image. And while Marvel is kind of its own self-contained thing, everybody knows Marvel's owned by Disney. They're very closely associated at this point. So what do? Well, it's worth noting that they aren't the only ones impacted by this. The U.S. Army was actually running recruitment ads featuring Majors, and those have been pulled, with the Army stating that while Mr. Majors is innocent until proven guilty, prudence dictates that we pull our ads until the investigation into these allegations is complete, which for the Army is a pretty simple thing. They can run other ads. But what is Disney looking at? Well, I think the most immediate question is going to be on the second season of Loki. Now, they have a little bit of wiggle room on this insofar as they haven't actually confirmed the date on Loki. Right now, it's mid-2023. Now, mid could be anything from May to August. So that's a decent enough window for them to basically kind of hold out hope and hope the thing resolves. But eventually they're going to have to start kicking up the marketing on that thing. And that's another way in which it kind of parallels the more recent stuff going on with Ezra Miller, where Warner Brothers would never officially confirm what they were or weren't going to do, but had to kind of sit tight and hope that things quieted down and charges were dropped, which for the most part they have been. So they held out and they were okay. Disney's ability to do that, they don't have as much of a time window. It's also worth noting that things get complicated in regards to allegations against actors and the specifics of them. Because something I didn't get into last time I talked about Ezra Miller was that Ezra Miller, at the time that I made the last video I did on them, had gone into some sort of treatment for mental health. And there are stipulations within most Screen Actors Guild union contracts that you can't fire an actor who is in the process of undergoing that kind of treatment. Now, whether or not you can fire them for having been charged with a crime, that's not exactly the same thing. So there's a little bit more freedom to do it there, but there's always just the general perception of, oh, you're going to fire him based off an accusation when not only has it not hit a courtroom yet, but there isn't even like much information out there. And Disney acting too quick, again, is what bit them in the ass with James Gunn. So I could see them being reluctant to do that. But at the same time, they're going to have to make a choice kind of quick. If I were to guess, I would say that if this does not basically go away on its own, charges dropped, claims recanted, and everybody moves on, then I would not be shocked at all if Loki Season 2 gets pushed back. They might claim for something else, but they pull forward whatever stuff they have in the pipeline that doesn't feature him. The thing is, we don't know how much of it that is. Given the way the character's been designed, he could theoretically be cropping up in almost everything to some degree. Now, maybe it's a very minor thing, just a hint at where things are building, or maybe it's slightly more substantive and harder to cut out. Because, in theory, again, I'm not trying to pick on Josh Brolin, but if he had caused a problem back when he was being Thanos, if there was an issue before the release of the first Guardians of the Galaxy, he's in it and he matters, but his actual appearance could have been cut out and covered for, because it's really only one or two scenes in that. But, by the time we were getting into things like Avengers Infinity War, again, we're not that far along in the current phase, but still, it's hard to know which products can be pulled forward that don't currently depend on him. But definitely the next one that was coming up, Loki Season 2, yeah. We know he was majorly in it because there was a teaser for it at the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and his face was literally the first thing in that teaser. So there is a lot that Disney's going to have to figure out. And the thing that I always say whenever these kinds of charges come up is whether or not he retains this position, whether or not the charges are dropped, whether or not any of it, people are going to make their own call as to whether or not they are comfortable watching him in this part or at all. And you have every right to do that. I'll go back to stuff I said way back with Gina Carano and Rosario Dawson and why I was initially not planning to watch the second season of The Mandalorian, which was I just wasn't comfortable watching them. And even if everything panned out fine, everything's all good, no worries, I just didn't want to look at them. It wasn't sitting right with me. And that didn't mean I was calling for them to be fired. That was actually the initial point of that video that I did way back when that stuff initially started breaking. This was before Gina Carano was fired. My thought was, no, they don't need to be fired. I'm not going to watch, but they don't need to be fired. So, you have every right to personally go, yeah, maybe I'll skip some stuff because I'm not comfortable seeing him right now. That's your right. I don't know what Disney should be doing right now. Because like I said, in an older situation, like a few years ago before all the Marvel stuff was coming, each on the heels of another, one after another, go, 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 go. We go back even 5 years when there was 2, maybe 3 productions in a year. I think they could have shifted stuff around, moved some stuff back, but now it's 4 or 5 productions, Marvel-related productions in a year. And they're coming out so rapidly, and the productions are happening back to back to back to back, that when the wheels come off, one aspect of it, there's a domino effect, because these things are all interconnected and interlocked, especially for characters that are meant to recur over and over and over again. It sort of shows the unplanned for weakness of this structure. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of difficulty trying to do a massive cinematic universe, as exemplified by the fact that so far Marvel's is really the only one who has pulled it off with really a high degree of success, with Star Wars coming in maybe second. But the thing is, when things are so interconnected, so interdependent, so built one on the other, one after another, things like we can't use this actor anymore throws a much bigger wrench into things. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine how many plans got scrapped off the death of Chadwick Boseman. He was somebody they really thought they were going to have for a long time, and they lost him. Now, obviously, Majors is not dead, but he might be unavailable, depending on how things go. Or at the very least, he might be publicity-wise untenable. Because the other thing is, even if they keep him, it's going to make promotion difficult. It's going to make promoting anything with him in it difficult to cut around, because they're going to want to minimize his involvement. They're probably not going to be comfortable sending him out on the press junket to actually promote the thing, because he'll end up getting a ton of uncomfortable questions about what's been going on instead of about the movie. So it's going to hamper things no matter what. And that's even if, again, charges dropped, claims recanted. It's still going to make things weird and awkward if they have to start gearing up the marketing machine in a matter of months from now. Which is why I would not be at all surprised if Loki ends up getting delayed. At the very least, it's going to come out as late as it possibly can and still fit within that mid-2023 claim, which I would say August would be the latest they could get away with, and claim they released it within the time frame they said. But depending on how things go, depending on whether or not there's new revelations, depending on whether or not there's more corroborations, depending on whether or not this actually sees the inside of a courtroom, that might not be enough time. So if I were to guess, if anything's going to get delayed, it is definitely going to be Loki season 2. They might shuffle some other stuff around to give padding to wait until they get to the next thing that he's supposed to be involved in, whether it's something that he shot his part for already or not, and just kind of push it to the back to give this as much time to, in their minds, hopefully play out in a way that is favorable to him, that they can be comfortable using him again, so it doesn't completely wreck the brand. But we'll see. This going to court would be worst case scenario for Disney, if this actually goes to the inside of court. Because even though the charges are misdemeanors, if this goes to court, then details are going to come out. Explicit details about exactly what he's accused of. And those details, even in a case where somebody is eventually acquitted, the kinds of things that come out in discovery, in witness testimony, if they bring character witnesses, definitely, the kind of stuff that can come forward can be really damaging no matter the outcome. Especially for a brand as concerned with its image as Disney. Again, this would be way less of a problem if this was Warner Brothers, Sony, Universal, anybody other than Disney. Disney's got a much bigger problem when it comes to something that is going to taint the image that they have built their entire brand on. So we'll see what happens. But I guarantee you, this is a week where a whole bunch of executives are sweating bullets, and a whole bunch of creatives are sitting on the edge of their seat waiting to find out how much their plans are going to get changed. What are your thoughts about all this? Please avoid derogatory language for any of the people involved. Don't do that. I'll delete your comment. Depending on how nasty it is, I'll block you from commenting again. So, let's be as polite as possible. That understood. Drop your thoughts down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living. Any amount you can contribute there is of immense help. Even if you can't, like, share, subscribe, help me out as well. Don't worry too much about that, though, because what I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, you are loved. You're the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. This video wouldn't have been possible without my supporters over on Patreon, and I would especially like to thank Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Ruth, Oliver B., Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Imudelki, Leotha Boyd, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Bernabe Lax the Poodle, Robin Powell, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperol, Tim Price, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, David Hall, General Contact Unit Problem Child, Shayla Gourlay, and Rosalind Bennett. Thank you so much.